Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about some wrestling stuff today as things continue to move, and I want to talk about it from a WWE and an AEW slash ROH perspective. And again, anytime that WWE posts anything online or somebody posts an article about WWE, you'll have AEW fans going, "This sucks." And then if you post anything about AEW anywhere, WWE fans will come in, "This sucks," and it's dumb. These are two completely different companies. Having two healthy wrestling companies is better for the wrestlers. So if you actually like the wrestlers and you like wrestling, it is important to have more than one company. I'm going to say this though. How the ROH situation settles out is going to be very interesting because you have two companies owned by the same guy, right? ROH hasn't been on TV for a while. They had a pay-per-view on the weekend. From all accounts, it sounds like it was an excellent pay-per-view. I did not watch Death Before Dishonor, but it sounds like it was very good. And so ROH, once they've got their spot on TV, I think it's important to make sure that ROH is its own entity. Because I've heard comparisons of, well, it might be like NXT is to WWE. If it's a developmental project, then it shouldn't be its own company. It shouldn't have its own name, and it shouldn't have a world champion as its own company if it's seen as developmental. If it's seen that if you're an ROH, you're eventually going to go to AEW, that's a problem. I really think the best way to go about this is to treat them like they're equals. Basically, and even if they're not, financially or however, make sure you've got champions in ROH that could absolutely, realistically, for fans like us, compete with the champions in AEW, and I think it could fix a lot of the issues going on. Both companies, for booking, it's been a bit of a mess. WWE's booking has been, let's have the Street Profits face off against the Usos. Okay, now again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And while I was saying that, they fought each other two more times. Whereas in AEW, it is a matter of they've got so many wrestlers and they've got so many different ways to go about it. Having those long-term storylines is important. And outside of Christian's long-term storytelling with Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, there are some stop and goes that are going on here, or just random matches posting up as almost main event. And that's an issue. So I think the booking side of things on both companies needs improvement. Now, if you're a WWE fan, the good news is Triple H is in charge of creative. The time has finally come. WWE fans have said this for a very long time, that well, once Vince is out and Triple H takes over the booking, so here we are, Stephanie's CEO, co-CEO with Nick Khan, of course, and Triple H is in charge of creative. So it is possible that we'll start seeing booking decisions that we all agree with. Now, the other thing with this is you may end up with fewer wrestlers being frustrated with their standing in WWE and less likely to defect and go over to AEW. The other thing, too, is he may be able to provide an olive branch for some guys who have their AEW contracts coming up and maybe return to WWE or head there for the first time. Now, Jonathan Gresham has asked for his release from ROH. Reportedly, there were issues backstage between himself and Tony Khan. It's not the first time we've seen that. Tony Khan is stepping into a situation I wouldn't want to step into. You've got wrestlers who've been wrestling for a very long time. Tony Khan likely wouldn't be viewed in the same light as Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon's been in the wrestling business for decades and decades and decades. So he's earned a certain amount of respect from wrestlers. Now, we can all agree that his conduct has been spotty at best, Vince McMahon. But Tony Khan would have a bit of a credibility issue. Think of the MJF promo, for instance, where he calls him a mark. I guarantee there are wrestlers in WWE and AEW that agree with that statement. And of course, being a mark means you're a sucker. You're not to be taken seriously by wrestlers, right? So Gresham asking for his release. He loses the title to Claudio Castagnoli, formerly known, of course, as Cesaro, and known as Castagnoli before he was Antonio Cesaro. But Gresham, if he's released, I would expect him to show up in WWE. Although, that being said, Japanese wrestling companies and Mexican wrestling companies are often a good solution as well. And you can get decent pay on the indies. You're not going to get WWE or AEW level pay, but there are some guys who make a pretty handsome living on the indies as well. Now, one other thing too is that today Paige kind of hints that maybe there'll be a match between her and Britt Baker. Now, Paige has been talking about this for months, looking at Edge coming back, looking at Bryan Danielson coming back, and believing that there's the possibility she can come back as well. She can come back and start wrestling again. Now, her contract with WWE being up, and that's been the word, would mean that if she goes to AEW, I would think using her real name, Saraya. But if Saraya shows up in AEW, because she can't use the Paige name, that'd be WWE's, right? Her against Britt Baker could absolutely tear the roof off the place. If she comes out and if she's able to use the music she had in WWE, the whole place will go completely crazy. And that could really help the women's division. Now, I say that even though when Ember Moon, now back to her name Athena, showed up, we thought, hey, maybe this will help the women's division. And it has, but there's some stops and starts that go on there too, and it's kind of frustrating. There are so many really, really good wrestlers in AEW, and maybe that's part of the problem. It's a nice problem to have, but maybe there's too many talented wrestlers. Also, the rumor's been out there for a long time that TNT only wants one women's segment or match per week. So if that's the case, and when you've got a 2-hour show, remember AEW in terms of TV time, they have the 2 hours for Dynamite. They have 1 hour for Rampage, which does not broadcast a lot of places. Rampage doesn't do the kind of ratings that Dynamite does, in part because of the fact that it doesn't have the same broadcast reach. For WWE, you have 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, and then you have NXT as well. You have 6 hours of broadcasting during any given week. So you have twice the broadcasting time in WWE that you do in AEW. And both rosters are similarly staffed, meaning you have half the time for just as many good wrestlers in AEW as you do for WWE. Now, of course, WWE fills a lot of that time with recaps, and here's what you just saw, which is so frustrating. I just saw it. I know, you don't have to show me the whole thing. Don't assume that everybody turned it off in the last 10 minutes. So there are some things, too, with WWE. Today, the stock did go up. Now, part of this might be because they're cleaning house, Vince being out, and they're revising financial statements to account for the $14.6 million paid by Vince. Now, where that throws me off is something simple. If he paid for it out of his own pocket, shouldn't that not matter to the financial statements? Because the financial statements are from the company, and if he was spending money as hush money out of company money, that's a huge problem. Now, there's also word that's still out there today that other probes and investigations are likely. There are other accusations coming forward. There are other things about Vince coming forward. And I've talked about this before too. I really think all they have to do is just go all the way back to the early 80s and talk about everything that wrestling fans already know about Vince. Just put it out to the mainstream. Here's what we know about Vince. And a lot of it is it's not flattering to Vince. It doesn't paint Vince in a very particularly good light. So in the event that everything came out, and again, going way back, there's a lot there to unpack. It could make things tougher, but again, he's retired, so they can turn around and say, okay, all this stuff about Vince, he's now out of the company. He doesn't have a say in what goes on TV anymore. He's no longer backstage with the wrestlers, and they can kind of distance themselves from that. Now, the fact that his daughter's running the company and his son-in-law is in charge of creative would maybe look kind of fishy to some, but for those of us who are wrestling fans, we understand. I'm happy for Steph. I think Stephanie McMahon honestly should be able to do this. I think she's a good leader. I think Triple H in charge of creative, I think, is a fantastic idea. As long as we don't see that favoritism we've seen from Triple H at times when he was wrestling. The Clique had some good favorable booking during that time, but as long as he can maintain that objectivity and push the right guys, I think WWE's in good shape here. The one thing I will say is, on the AEW side, Tony Khan, I think, is still learning. He sent out I'm now the longest reigning CEO in professional wrestling, which I think is humorous, and I get it. I get what he's saying. But I think he's still learning. I think that AEW is still growing, and I don't think that AEW has reached its final stage of what it's going to look like when all is said and done. There were growing pains for WWF back in the day. I remember I watched them. There were some painful shows, painful, cheesy moments back in the early mid 80s that really, as cringy as they were, the reality was there was so much momentum for wrestling that you couldn't kill it at that point. It was Hulkamania, Andre the Giant, Cyndi Lauper in the ring. Everybody loved Wendy Richter except Moolah, and Vince when she demanded more money, so he canned her. Again, a lot of this stuff, if it comes out to the mainstream, is going to be it's going to be interesting. But I think both companies are going to be in good shape. And I am interested to see how Tony Khan deals with the ROH problem. Because again, it can't be its own company if it's constantly, bringing in AEW guys and making them the top guys. And again, it's going to be a challenge. Vince McMahon would buy territories, but he didn't keep their shows on the air. He bought the territory. He got the rights to all of their shows. He could put all their shows onto streaming service, or back in the day, he'd put them on DVD, and he'd make money that way off of the deal. He never actually tried to maintain WCW. He never tried to maintain the AWA when he bought their library, or Stampede Wrestling. The idea of buying another company and then trying to keep it as its own company, which Tony Khan's trying to do with ROH, it is a noble cause. I don't know that he can do it. I don't know that it's going to work. And again, we'll see. We'll see how this all turns out. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch this summer. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video, you can see I'm wearing my West Coast Kids Cancer Foundation shirt. Good charity that I worked with before. And yeah, they help families while their kids are going through cancer treatments. They help out. So basically, you're providing meals, you're providing support for these families so they can really devote all their attention to helping their child through cancer treatment. So it's a good charity. All right, there you go. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.